key thing we'll be doing here is just getting data on how these things work. Maybe after that time we can look at trying to optimize the system and choose the most efficient combinations of species. The skylight itself, the underside, you notice, has this kind of funny sawtooth cross section. That's for both helping the window to resist buckling as it holds in the internal pressure, and they also serve as prisms, so that the sunlight coming in, which would otherwise be pretty harsh, gets broken up by the prisms and dispersed, which should result in a more pleasing illumination. And so that's how that looks. Okay, so back here. Okay, next, the hangers. I made these images right after I built the hanger, before I placed it into the wheel. You can see here it's basically like a big workshop kind of area with an inner door leading to an airlock which goes to the indoor part of the wheel. And I was able to accommodate very large equipment, up to almost 3 stories in height. And the big door opens, of course, to the outdoor area, kind of like so. And so there is your lunar proving ground. And for added realism, we could even spread regolith across the floor of this, which allows to simulate the electrostatic environment, which affects some equipment. Not all equipment, though, and it's rather messy stuff. So since we have 2 of these proving grounds, I figured, well, maybe we'll just put regolith on one side, and then we would have kind of like a dirty side and a clean side of the station. On the far side, or far end of it, you can see another airlock door and a set of stairs going to the roof. There's really nothing to do on the roof. That's there mostly as a safety feature. My thought is that if the airlock malfunctions, you can climb up and go up to the roof and walk across the skylight and come down on the other side, get to the other airlock. And if that one malfunctions, just keep walking and get to the 4th external airlock. My philosophy is that there's always a front door and a back door for anywhere you may find yourself on the wheel, so that no single airlock malfunction can ever trap you or lock you out. Okay, this is my favorite part of the whole station. This is where the guests go for the Earth viewing in a gravity environment. Okay, starting with our assumption about the orientation of the thing, and you ask yourself, where on the wheel would I put viewing windows for a lounge? Since the edge is facing toward the Earth, it might seem like that's the obvious place to put windows, but of course that's below the lower deck. That's the floor, basically. And you can put a window in the floor, but how exactly would that work then? Are you going to be looking at the Earth sort of between your feet? Or are you going to have to lie prone on the floor and then kind of try to look at the Earth that way? That didn't really seem very good. And if you try to put the window on the side of the wheel, you can see the Earth well, but you'll also see it appearing to spin in a way that might be nauseating. And also, you'd only really be able to see half of the Earth. And in order to see the other half, you'd have to run over to the other side of the station, look through the other window. And so that didn't seem very good either. And if you try changing the orientation of the station, it turns out it doesn't really help. It just causes other problems. So I almost couldn't believe, like, there's no good place on the wheel to put a viewing window, so it seemed. But here's my solution. You recall the cross-section of the wheel is a square with 3 decks. For just that part being used as the Earth viewing lounge, imagine replacing the lower deck with a completely transparent structure, like this. And so we're 30. So a completely transparent structure made of fused plexiglass, thick enough to both contain the internal pressure and serve as radiation shielding for the inhabitants. You see there's a narrow aisle down the middle with a line of bar stools alternating with tables so that meals can be served here. And now I'll take you inside so you can see this for yourself. Okay, so the idea is you come down from the mid deck and and first stop and get a little something from Isaac here, and then head on down and go in like it's this. And this is what it will be like. Now, one artificiality here is that I can move the camera in the scene, but I can't move things in the scene. At least I haven't been able to figure out how to do so. So actually, the Earth would appear to be rising or falling, depending on which way you're facing in the lounge. And I can't turn the camera as much as you would like. I apologize. I don't really have a complete illusion here. There's no actual 3D Earth down there below, but I hope this is enough to give you an idea that this would be a view to end all views. And a couple nice things about the configuration is that it doesn't feel like you're looking down, or it doesn't feel like you're looking through the floor. You are still looking down. The Earth is below you there, but because of the way the windows are sloped, it feels more like looking out to the side. Also, because of the narrow aisle there, the idea is that by looking to one side, you can see the Earth on one side, but then by just pivoting on your bar stool, you can see the Earth in the other direction. You still can't really see in both directions at once. It's just too big, but at least it's all available to you, and so you got everything that you paid for. Also, I would absolutely want the astronauts to be able to join the guests here to take their meals also. I think of this as the hotel side and the other side as the NASA side, but I would welcome the astronauts here, and I'm sure they would enjoy it, but although NASA might not want them drinking alcohol, but even if they just had meals here, not only would they enjoy it, I think the guests would get a lot out of it as well. Thinking about these astronauts being people who are either famous or on their way to becoming famous because they're heading to the moon, or perhaps may have already been to the moon and are serving aboard the station as a follow-on duty. Just think about who's going to have better stories to tell over drinks and dinner than somebody who's been to the moon. And later, it might be people who've been to Mars. So the guests get to kind of schmooze with the astronauts, get their autographs, get their picture taken with them, and that sort of thing. Think what a huge, unique draw that would be for the hotel. And also the, excuse me. Oh, yes, I'd also like the guests to be able to go over to the NASA side and see the experiments being done there and see how NASA operates the station. I don't foresee them suiting up and going outside, however. There's really no reason for that. No reason to take that risk. But they would be able to look through the windows and see all the cool equipment and know that it's the real stuff, not just museum replicas. And I have a few more external views of it here. Oops. From the edge, it looks a little odd because you're basically seeing the bottoms of all those bar stools there. Okay, now I mentioned before the matter of trying to keep things in balance with large pieces of equipment coming and going. It's important that we be able to move it from one proving ground to the other, I believe. And in order to do that, I first considered an overhead crane kind of arrangement, but the dynamics of using that on a rotating station were really complex, and trying to think about it just made my head hurt. And I never could decide if that would work. And so I went with plan B, which was more like a freight elevator on a vertical track. As you see here, it's got an open platform with just the floor and then the back wall attached to the drive mechanism that goes up the track. And it's large enough to accommodate big equipment. You just drive on there. And the track goes clear across the station, passing over the hub to the other outdoor area. Now, you notice a couple things about the track here. One is it has this kind of funny twisting motion or shape to it, which I'll explain in a moment. And also it has to pass through the lower mirror, as you see there. And I haven't fixed that yet, but a piece of that mirror is just going to have to kind of slide or fold out of the way. I've got a couple ideas how to do that. I just haven't included it in the model, but I'm not too concerned about that. But as for the twisting shape, the reason for that, you can see if you look here through the edge of the station, where this is the elevator car in the foreground. The problem is that if you try to go straight across, you collide with the hub and the spokes, and there's really no way to get those out of the way. And so my thought was that as the elevator rises, it would do this kind of half twist, so that by the time it reaches the hub, it's facing outward and can pass clearly over it. And then after that, it half twists back again on its way to the other side. Now, if that's all it did, by the time it got to the other side, it would actually be upside down. So one other thing that the elevator car has to do is that as it passes over the hub, it pauses and flips around 180 degrees, and then proceeds half twist back again, and then there you are on the other side. So I'm pretty sure that will work, but the one unfortunate thing about it is that by passing over the end of the hub that way, the track makes it very hard to use the end of the hub for anything else. And that's bad because that's a unique piece of real estate on any wheel station. And the other end of the hub, as you know, is already being used for a number of other things. And in particular, I still haven't solved an even bigger problem you may have noticed. I've talked about how to move that large equipment around on the wheel, but how do you get that aboard the station in the first place? Well, you obviously aren't going to bring them in the same way that people come in, which is through that little airlock dock up top. So looking again at the wheel station concepts I was able to find, usually what you want to do is to dock with the end of the wheel like this. And I couldn't seem to, it doesn't seem like that would be possible here. And I also considered the idea, which I'm sure you recall from the movie 2001, where as the shuttle approaches the station, it rotates and matches the station's own motion and then just kind of coasts right into the open hangar bay in the middle. And that seems really cool, but that sequence glossed over the part where the shuttle actually comes into contact with the station. Now, the technical consultants who came up with that had an idea of exactly how that would work, even though the sequence was never filmed. They worked out how all the mechanisms that would be involved, and it involves kind of a lot of complex structure, and it really is not very elegant. The more I looked at it, the less I liked it. And so I'm looking at this, trying to think of how to make any of these ideas work with this hub, especially with this stupid track in the way. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. I just came up with an elevator where the car goes to the hub and then flips around 180 degrees. Well, what if you just rotated the car opposite to the station's own rotational motion, so as to exactly cancel out the motion? Then the car would appear to be stationary to an approaching spacecraft. So then, if a spacecraft approaches like this, and if the equipment being brought aboard here can be mounted at a right angle as shown here, then the spacecraft would just have to place it against the back of the elevator car like that, as you see there. And if it could just do that, and if the elevator car had some kind of mechanism that could kind of grab hold of whatever you placed there, then once that was done, the spacecraft could detach from the cargo and back away, and that's it. Then the elevator car just spins back up or despins, depending on your perspective, and brings it on down to the rim. And that seems to be all needed, which means that the spacecraft doesn't have to do any rotating of its own, and it doesn't even have to make a precise hard docking with anything, which I think is about as easy as you can make it for the spacecraft. And then once you're finished testing the equipment and you're ready to bring it back off, you just reverse the process, and now you bring it to the hub, and now the spacecraft just has to approach it and sort of pluck the cargo off the back of that elevator, and then take it on to its final destination. So in this approach, the elevator serves two completely different functions then. And given that it's doing this, it seemed to me that, I guess the back of the elevator then is kind of a docking target, and I thought, well, maybe I should put some kind of markings or something on it. And I looked at it from this view, from below, and I realized, well, heck, that whole station's one big docking target. Look at all those concentric circles. If you just line those up with each other, you should be right on. Okay then, so I think you get the idea of the wheel now, so I'm going to take you outdoors to the outdoor section and show you what it'd be like to be aboard. Let's see here. Okay, so there's the outdoor section. So imagine that's you. And so there's the elevator in the foreground. And if you were to look overhead, you would see the sun reflecting off that mirror down onto you. Then in the distance, you see a spoke and a skylight, a hangar. And if you turn to the side, you would be able to see the hub, which starts above you there and extends down into the distance. So it kind of looks like it's upside down. It would also appear to be rotating, even though, of course, it's the wheel that's really turning. Okay. A few more exterior views, kind of low angle there, and that's looking down from the mast. Okay, what to do about Mars? For Mars, you mostly need more gravity, and there's a couple ways you can do that. One way you won't be doing it is by simply spinning the wheel faster, because it's already at its limit for a number of practical reasons. It really shouldn't be spun any faster, so if you want more gravity, you just have to go larger. So a larger wheel, which I think of as phase 3 of this station. There are a number of ways to add that to this, and the way I decided I liked best was to use a larger wheel that rotates at the same rate as the lunar wheel, which is rigidly attached to it, and in fact in the same plane as the lunar wheel, so that the lunar becomes the inner wheel and the Mars wheel becomes the outer wheel. Okay, well this schematically represents what we've seen up to now with the indoor and outdoor sections and the spokes and so forth of the lunar wheel. If you added a Mars wheel to scale to this, it would be so much larger than a lunar wheel that it's really a lot more station than we need. And so what I concluded is that we don't need a Mars wheel, we need more like half of a Mars wheel. Like this. And you can see in this configuration, we still have plenty of room for both indoor and outdoor sections. The spokes connect through nicely to where the existing spokes are. And because of the way the outdoor areas are lined up, you can take the freight elevator and simply extend the track, and now the single elevator can serve 4 different outdoor areas. The cross section here is exactly the same as here, so you can build it with the same tools and techniques used to build the previous wheel. And of course, the main reason for leaving out the 2 quadrants there is that after all, we have an earth viewing lounge and we mustn't block the view, and on the other side we have the algae system and we mustn't block it from receiving sunlight. The Mars section can have its own algae panels and can grow its own food, meaning that the inner wheel can continue functioning very much as before, despite the fact that we've almost tripled the amount of enclosed volume on the rotating structure. Finally, one other thing we need to do though, because we don't have a complete wheel, the ends here are unsupported. When you spin it under gravity, they're going to tend to want to sag outward. And I don't want the spokes taking that stress because that's really not their purpose. So I think what we would do is use some support cables that would connect from one corner across the hub to the other corner, and likewise like that. I haven't added that to the model yet, however, because there was an interference problem with the elevator at the hub. And I've just recently figured out how I think I need to route the cables. So I haven't gotten around to adding it to the model. However, I can show you all the rest. Okay, so what I've done here is the mast has been raised just a little bit. Let's see here. And that's the Mars edition. Something else we have to do is provide more electricity for the Mars section, so that's done at the hub, and so we add a few of these. And finally, the upper mirror has to be expanded also, like so. And so that leads to this configuration. And I can zoom in later and show you any details you may want. But that's kind of the finale here. So it leads to, okay, and then there's your Mars proving ground. You can probably tell the curvature is a little less pronounced than on the lunar one. It's not outrageously large compared to things we've built in space up to now. Even with the Mars expansion, it seems kind of reasonable for a next generation space station. And it results in a configuration that's very unlike anything I've ever seen proposed before, but one which I think has a kind of logic to it, which I hope makes sense to you. So then, I had to call it something, so provisionally I'm calling it SkyWheel. I'm not really crazy about the name, so if you have a better idea, I'd welcome suggestions. But I think this meets all those requirements that I laid out for myself at the beginning. And it does so by serving a variety of functions you have here for a variety of customers. And it grows incrementally, and best of all, it does a whole lot of risk reduction for space colonization. So where from here? I'd sure like your inputs to this concept, and I have a business card for anyone who doesn't want to worry about scribbling down my email address. I really like your inputs to help shore this up and fix any problems you may have spotted along the way. Even better, I'd like for you to have your own concepts of your own wheel stations if you see the value in this. I realize you may not have time to make something with this much detail, but if you can just depict the general idea of the key features you think such a wheel ought to have, I think that would be valuable. And I don't mind making modifications to this one also. So I'm going to continue to present this in public, and eventually when it's been vetted enough, I'd like to get this in front of NASA, although I don't really have good contacts in NASA to do that. So I'd also welcome any help in opening doors there. As for the future, I intend to build upon this model to make the next generation spin gravity station, one I described in my talk yesterday, the one I call the Outpost, which would go out near the moon to support lunar operations. But I'm impatient to get beyond that to the next thing after that, which would be the actual first colony. I again have an idea for a configuration that will be very different from anything I've seen proposed, and it flows from what you've seen here today. Meanwhile, I'm also trying to write a book, and so who knows when I'll be able to actually get these done. But with any luck, perhaps next year I can show you the Outpost, then the year after the colony. Until then, I sure hope to hear from as many of you as possible, and I thank you very much for your attention.